I am Frank Turner. My birthday is October 5th, 1929. My mother was Elia Dutchman from Shagluk, and my dad's name is George H. Turner. Born in London, England. When he was 18, the gold rush in Dawson City was on, and then made his way to Shagluk in 1903. He married my mother, and he loved the outdoor life. He loved trapping, and he had a dog team. But he always wanted a store in Holy Cross, but it was mission ground. The mission owned all the land there. So he had this little store that he established in the Point, right across the Yukon River from Holy Cross on the Innoko. Our little community there was 8 new cabins being built, and people came across from Holy Cross and bought food and groceries, and that's how I ended up in the Point. My mother passed away when I was 3 years old, and my sisters went to Bellingham, Washington with a school teacher, John Jardy, who was teaching school in Shagluk. They never came back. My dad sent the rest of my family to the Anvik Mission, and I stayed with a family, Alec Richardson. He was running a store there for my dad. And I didn't obey very well. I didn't know what happened to me. I was missing my family, and I was very sad. I was a very sad young boy. My first memory of my life, and it seemed like I was watching this little boy in a crib, sitting there crying, and I looked over at a bed. There was an old man on that bed. He was snoring. He had a round mouth with no teeth. There was a fly flying around him, and I thought that fly was going to go in his mouth, so I was really focusing on that, but that didn't happen. And now today I realize that I was that little boy in the crib, crying. I guess there was 2 18-year-old girls in there that were in charge of me. So I tested them one time, I guess. I didn't eat my mush, and I was taken by the hand and brought into the woods. And right away we saw a porcupine. And I ran back and ate my mush. So they found out that I would listen when they said this big animal was going to get you, you know. And I remember another time that I finally got to meet this young boy, about the same age as me. His name was Moses Edwards. And I think we were both 4 years old, and we played together. You know, there were fish camps there where they cut their fish in the summer and hung their fish. And so Moses, he made a drying rack out of string. And we would run and get little leaves and then split the leaves and hang them on there, and that was our fish. And that game would last us all day long. We would fill up our little drying rack of fish, and we wanted to make fire under there, but we couldn't. We weren't allowed to make smoke under that. That was one of the games we had. I remember staying there through a winter, through a summer. So I was there till I was 5, 6 years old. I was taken up to flat on the mailboat. The name of it was the Nancy Bell. And, we got up to the landing, and coming down to the bank was the biggest animal I ever saw. And the boys began throwing boxes on there. And I knew some of those boxes were crackers. And I thought, oh, they're feeding it. So pretty soon that thing was all loaded up. And they brought me over there and threw me up, and somebody on top of that load caught me, pulled me in. Of course, I was screaming, crying, and hollering, and the big animal started going. And it finally got me. That was what happened. That big animal finally got me. The trauma, whatever it was, is blanked out my mind. I don't remember anything else for a long time anyway. I found out later it was called a truck. It had wheels. I came right out of the woods and saw my first truck, which was an animal to me. Yeah, that was that one. I joined the rest of my family in Flat. There were 3 native families there: Turner family, the Jensen family, and the Miller family. The school was really fun. The name of that school was Otter Territorial School. Towards spring, the river would glacier, and it would come over the bank and come right up to the school steps. And we wore skates, put them on at our house, and skate up to school. That was a lot of fun. And I remember being in the 1st grade, and a question was asked on the board there to the 3rd grade. What was the answer to these numbers? No one raised their hand, so over in the 1st grade I raised my hand, and she asked me, and I gave the right answer. It wasn't very long I was moved up to a higher grade. Every morning the teacher read to us a story, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Boy, that was an amazing book. That got me into reading, and I learned how to read books and enjoyed them. But a little bit about living in Flat. It was 8 miles over to Iditarod. What we learned was they sold candy and pop over there. So when I was really young, I started panning gold. We'd have to pan for maybe a couple hours, and we got $1 worth of gold, and we'd go down, buy candy and pop. There was an airfield in Flat. I remember the Winnie Mae. It flew around the world. I was looking at it. It was on top of the hill there. Wiley Post, he went to the end of it and he nosed up. A bunch of them went up there and helped put it down, and they took the prop off and helped straighten it out. And first flight, it flew around the world. My stepmother, she was Esther Workman from Shagluk. My dad married her, and he ran our home like we were military. We all had a chore to do after school. I had to pack in the kindling and got up to hunting ptarmigan and bringing in rabbit. It was time to go to the 9th grade. There was no 9th grade. So my dad said, "You're going trapping." Beaver trapping with these 3 guys over at Moore Creek on the hill. They said it's 40 miles and your job is to steer the sled. It was fully loaded, stoves and dogfish and everything in there. And I had to get on those skis and the Jeep-O was lashed onto the sled, and the Jeep-O was for steering the sled. And they took off on snowshoes ahead of me. The going was kind of slow as the trail was drifted in. We came to a cut bank going down into the river. The sled tipped over and couldn't get it up off of there. I crawled, I finally kept looking at the sled and how it was laying there, and I started digging under the one runner until it fell down into that little hole. I made it all along the runner. Then it was easy to tip it up. We went along those trails all day long, and there they were up on top of the summit. I caught up with them. They had got 3 caribou, and they buried them in the snow, so we stopped to pick up some meat. So that's my first experience learning to trap beaver. And the marten season was still open. And for those big black marten, I remember they were getting $100 back then, in '43. My dad later bought me a bike with my beaver money. Platte was because my dad said there's going to be a ghost town here. People are leaving. Mining is running out, and was going to start a store in Holy Cross. My dad had a boat and a brand new 5-horse kicker. So the spring of 1943, we got out into the Iditarod Flats and behind the ice. The whole country was like a big lake, like the ocean. There were lumps sticking up. And my dad stopped at one of these lumps and he said, gather some sticks up, short sticks, and we gathered some up and brought them in the boat. He threw these sticks out. What he was doing was looking for the current of the river. We had tea and lunch and took off for Holigachuk, and then to Shagluk, and then on into Holy Cross. We moved to Holy Cross, and my dad had a store there. And my dad said, do you want to go to high school? And I said, yes. My sister lived in Bellingham, Washington, and that's where we had to go to high school. And we had to catch the next steamboat that came along. And we had to go, it looked like every 10 miles, pull over to the wood pile on the bank, and the men loaded cordwood down on it. So we were really going slow. We had to catch an airplane, an old DC-3, and fly to Fairbanks. One stop in Canada, and in Seattle. We were there for a full week. We stayed in 4th Avenue in the Roosevelt Hotel. But every day my dad had business, he said, go to the movies. And these were stories, Western stories about Indians and cowboys. I was somewhere where I wanted to be. I never saw movies before. Now I'm seeing movies. And we finally got to Bellingham, where I'm going to go to school. We met my sister Irene. She lived in the country too, with no running water and sewer like I did when I was growing up. After my dad left. And it wasn't long where I was walking along the road one day. I saw this horseback in the field. Thought to myself, I'm Indian. I saw those Indian steel horses in the movies. And I jumped up on it. It was a big horse. I saw how they made him go, you know. So I did that on its side and it took off. And a car came and stopped. And he rolled the window down. He looked at me and he said, where are you going with my horse? And he said, take it back. That's an old plow horse. It's not to ride. I saw his son in the back. His son was my age. I saw him. He was laughing. Those people became my best friends. They were the Creightons. They lived a couple of houses up. And I went to church there with them. And the school teacher that used to live in Shaglook, John Jardy. So anyway, I'm going to Mount Baker High School. And later on, they had a basketball, and they were throwing the basketball in the hoop. So I made it on the team. And I got on the baseball team. But I didn't last very long on the football team. I was tackled and went over. My toe was pointing backwards, it wasn't pointing ahead. I was in the hospital 11 weeks with that. Just came out in time to take my semester test. So high school was fun. I worked in the summer in the farms, stacking hay, milk cows. I had chickens, learned how to plow fields. I graduated when I was 17, and my friend from the church, he said, well, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to university, but I don't have money right now. He said, well, the good thing for you would be to go to the Army. Then they would pay for you to go to school. So that's how I happened to join the military. They sent me to Fort Ord, basic training, and then Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to learn how to be an electrician. I got to see the Smithsonian. And one day in the Smithsonian Institute, there's that airplane hanging up there, the Winnie Mae. And on the fuselage, it said Nome, Alaska, Flat, Alaska, Fairbanks, Alaska. And I had an old box camera and took pictures of that. Anyway, going to electrical school, and I was a trained electrician now, and they were sending me to Guam. And our job was to take all the wires, electric wires off the palm trees and set up with new wiring. So I was there for 18 months. I was on the island of Guam. Got to go swimming in the ocean weekends. I went going back to the States again. And while I was on the ship, the war in Korea broke out. So we began training, and my assignment was fire direction control. They had 6 105s, artillery guns, and they give us the coordinates of the target. We plotted on the map, and we measured the distance so we know how high to raise that gun to hit that target. So we practice this over and over and over and over. You got to be able to do this in seconds, not minutes, in seconds. We're there, now it's dark. Pretty soon here comes mortar rounds dropping in on us. They've got our army pushed down to a little community, Busan, Southern Korea, where they're all pushed down to there. And I got volunteered to go up and be a forward observer and call in the targets. I had another one learning how to fire. And you know, you learn to trust in the Almighty there. You trust in God. And you say, get me through this. But my main prayer was, I didn't want to shoot another person hand to hand. I didn't want to shoot or bayonet another person. I said, Lord, you do that. That's all I'm asking is don't let me, because if I had to, I knew I would. And I never had to do that. My prayers were answered. And I thought if I had to do something like that and did it, that it would change the rest of my life. I wouldn't be the same again. I wasn't angry at these people. I was doing a job for my country. You know, that's what I felt I was doing, and I was doing it well. It came time for me to be discharged, and I went back to flat, baling tailings in the mine. My brother and I, we worked together, and we saved the money on that trip. We both wanted to go to learn to fly. So we didn't go home from there, we went to Fairbanks. It was $20 an hour to learn to fly. We sold it out and was able to land, and that's the highest bounce I ever made. It wouldn't stay down. So in the meantime, my brother and I bought an airplane, and we started practicing after we got home on skis. We kept in the store business, we'd haul groceries to Hologachuk and to Shagluk. And then my first passenger was Luke Dementa. He wants to go to the Iditarod River. And we're going across the point of the hill, all at once my engine quits. And just winding down. No place to land. Darn, he said. I said, what's wrong, Luke? I forgot my snowshoes. That's the only worry he had. Not that we're going to crash into this side of this hill or trees. So I turned back without even realizing what I did. I put my hand on the primer and shoot, took off. I flew all the way to Hologachuk like that, priming gas. What I found out was we bought this airplane from a mechanic. So Cy Hetherington, he had added a sediment bowl on it. It froze up with ice and the gas couldn't come through. So we found that in Hologachuk and we cleaned that screen and we flew on up to Luke's cabin. My second trip was with Billy Turner. It's almost at the same place. So we land, we get out, overflow. I said, wow. I said, we're not only in deep snow, we're in water. Well, what we had to do, we had to cut long willows to finally get the airplane and pack the snow down with snowshoes. Now we made an airstrip with willows, and Billy had to get out of the airplane, get me moving, and then get in while I'm flying, while I'm trying to take off. And I look back, he's hanging on, and we're going pretty fast. He's hanging on, he got in. Boy, and we got to the end. I didn't know whether we were going to go down. We got to the end of the willows, and we made it off. That was something. I took out Wilson Giroux. We landed in a big lake, and we had that deep snow. We could not take off. And I was running the engine wide open. But when I looked back after trying to take off, holy wow, I blew all that loose snow off behind me. We kept moving, blowing off loose snow. We made an airstrip just blowing off that loose snow. Wilson and I, we got off just before dark that evening. Another discovery accidentally. But I flew trappers for 10 years, all over the place. I made a living with the airplane. I was working with a guy named Bob Jenks, the early days of TCC. We were working to get the square mile from Holy Cross back from the Catholic mission. We went to one state and federal land meeting. They laughed at us. He said, "You'll never get it like that," they told him. So we went to the Catholic bishop He said, you work out the documents. What we had to do, they had to return the land to the federal government. Then we had to claim it again under the Land Claims Act, ANSCA. So it worked out, and we got it like that. Now we had a village council, an active village council, and I was one of their first sub-regional directors. And in those early days, they used to do a potluck. Shaguk would invite Holigachuk, and they'd all come over there. There's always a messenger that goes out. It allowed the people to mix. They'd all have partners in the community, and they would dance. You brought them home for lunch to your house, gave them tea. You took good care of your partner all the time. But how Holy Cross did it, every one of those elders had their own dance. I was so interested in what they were doing, and they said, we'll teach you a dance. Some of them had a crane dance. That was going to be mine. He screams like when you rub a comb, brr, brr. The crane is coming into Holy Cross over the hills. And then he's looking over, he's flying along, and you're doing the motions. Back here, tundra, out there, sandbar. Oh, I go, find nice place to eat. In the crane he eats. You sing Godama Lane, and you're courting the female crane during that part of the dance. So that's all there is to it. And you do that over and over. So that was my dance. So I met Mary Margaret Frank in a dance. She became my wife, and we had 6 children. She was still very young, in her late 30s when she passed away. And I met Mary Jo a couple of years later. She was my last passenger that I had. I flew her into Holy Cross, and she stayed. So we were married, and the BIA hired me as an electrician, and I traveled building high schools, moved on up to building water and treatment plants and putting water and sewer in the villages all over Alaska. You know what I'm thankful for? I met the Korean ambassador, and he was awarding a peace medal to the Korean War veterans, the combat veterans of that time. We had a big family. We have a lot of grandchildren now. Mary Jo and I, we thank God for every single day, every morning. We thank you for this day. Guide us and lead us through this day. May we do the right things. If we need to help somebody, put that person before us today. What I learned in the later years of my life is always somebody needs help. Somebody needs it more than you. Find that person and help them. You're not only helping them, but you're helping yourself. It's written in the Bible that to honor your mother and your father, that your days may be long on the land which the Lord your God give you. Honor your father and your mother. You're honoring your elders. Thank you. Can we talk again sometime? You and I?